Hello, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Boudoir Guild's show. Every time I do this intro, I think, I gotta come up with a new name for these interview series. You know what? That's your homework, folks. Write it in the comments below. What should I call these interview shows so I can actually get through an interview and sound like I know what the hell I'm doing. Anyway, I am here with Kersten Lutz of the Camera Shake podcast, but also he's a headshot photographer out of the UK. And I get questions all the time in the Facebook group and on emails. They're like, that's cool, Mike. This stuff works in America, but across the pond, people are different. So this episode I'm super stoked for is we are going to talk all about how to get people comfy in front of your camera, how to build rapport, how to get someone to look like they are natural in front of your camera. So you've got two different cultures we work with. We've got two different genres of photography. But I think you're going to find that people are people no matter where the heck we are. So welcome to the party, Kersten.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Great introduction.
Thanks. So in 74 words or fewer, can you give us a quick intro of yourself? Or how do you get to where you are?
How do I get to where I am? Well, I used to be a session musician, funnily enough. But I'm also a third generation photographer. And so it was just a matter of time until I found myself with a camera in my hands. And I've always loved photographing people. That's just the thing. So rather than landscapes or inanimate objects or whatever, or animals, I've just always liked working with people because I think, strangely, I'm actually more of an introvert, but I do love working with people. And whether that's, I don't know, whether I find that I have to prove something to myself or whatever it is, it's, I just love doing it. And, the thing about headshot photography, the one thing that's always drawn me to headshot photography is the satisfaction that I see in my clients' eyes when they look at the finished shot. There's sort of a spark of astonishment that sort of rushes over their expression, and it's very similar, as a musician, I know this, when people listen to a song, like when you listen to music, for example, that can have an emotional impact on you. And so, when people see images, especially when they see images of themselves, especially when they weren't very maybe confident or something like that, and then they see an image and it looks awesome, and they realize that actually, it wasn't as terrifying as they thought it was going to be. Yeah. That's a really satisfying thing to witness, and I think, I love that part of it. So.
And a great lesson for life. All the things we think are generally going to be scary and we're going to be terrible at, we rarely ever are, and they very rarely are. So maybe we could learn from our own clients' repeated anxiety, and, we can grab life by the horns.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of anxiety in having your picture taken. The vast majority, I think 90%, at least 90% of my clients, one of the first things they say when they come in is like, "Oh, I hate having my picture taken."
Yep.
Or I had some photos taken some years ago and they were terrible, and so it's all about taking that anxiety away from them and getting them to relax.
Yeah,
that's it.
Right. Everyone walks in like, "I'm not photogenic. I'm sorry you have to deal with me today." I'm like, bring it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's really the challenge. I think that's the challenge, getting somebody to relax and to chill out and to have a good experience. Because, for the longest time, I thought that what I'm selling as a headshot photographer is a product, like I'm selling a photograph, right?
Yep.
Until I realized that actually what I am doing is I'm selling an experience. And that's ultimately what makes people come back, and it makes people recommend your services. It's all about how they feel when they're with you, and how ultimately I make them feel during the session. And the end result, the photograph in the end, is really only the cherry on the top. It's that whole experience that really sells it for them. And that's where the recommendations come from, really, ultimately.
Absolutely. And I notice the same thing with my clients. Like, I get referrals after the photo shoot. They haven't even seen the photos yet. And it's like, what if I'm a terrible photographer? You haven't even seen the work, you know? But they're like, you made me feel so good. I want all my friends to experience this. So I've started using that in my own branding, my own marketing. And when I'm telling people about what I do, it's like I create this experience where you do this and we feel that. Oh, and then at the end, you get this gorgeous photo album of, you know, all these beautiful pictures of yourself. But the photos are the souvenir from the experience. And that's really why you're here. And it's why I'm different from other folks with cameras around me, and why I'm not worried about, you know, everyone who shops at Best Buy or Costco buying an expensive camera taking my job away, because they don't do what I do. So
Exactly. Like lots of people can take great photographs, you know, but you know, it's the experience that you have when you're there. That's the difference. And I mean, you know, as you say, you're actually putting it into your brand, like, you know, a therapeutic boudoir photographer.
Yeah.
I might nick that. I might be a therapeutic headshot photographer.
Do it. I haven't got the trademark finalized, so you, I think, are still allowed to do that.
It's good. Great idea.
I was on a consult call yesterday, and she's crying like 2 minutes into the call, and she's like, "You are easier to talk to than my therapist. What's going on right now?" I'm like, "You have no idea how many times I hear that." And also, I'm glad. Bring it. Open up. Let's do this.
Exactly. And it's, you know, it's really important to get people to open up to you like that. I mean, especially in your case, because you're really, you know, you're getting really, I mean, it becomes very personal because, you know, obviously people, you know, take their clothes off, or like, you know, they take their outerwear off, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Right. So, but, you know, even just, you know, the thought of exposing yourself, even if it's just a headshot,
Yeah.
you know, to someone who then freezes your image, you know, for all eternity, that, you know, that in itself is, you know, it's quite something. And of course, you know, nowadays you can always remember that what people compare their own imagery to is stuff that they see on Instagram,
Right.
you know, and or on TikTok or whatever. But none of that is real, you know, that people don't really understand that. You know, even, I mean, it can work the other way around. Like, for instance, I, you know, often have you know, clients who go like, "Oh, I don't want any photoshopping." And you go, "Well, okay, let me explain to you what that actually means." You know, I'm not going to make you look like a Barbie doll if that's
Right.
if that's what you're talking about. That's just, you know, but yeah, of course, people don't know the technical ins and outs of it,
Right.
and people very often have a total misconception of what the shoot itself is going to be like. And so
Yep.
it's my job, or our job as photographers, you know, to carry the client through that and to make it an awesome experience.
Yeah. So where do you start in that preparation? Because I'm assuming you don't just, you know, text somebody, "Hey, here's my address, send some money here, show up for your photo." There's some communication ahead of time to help prepare them, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It would be great if it worked like that. But no, of course. I mean, it's, you know, there's sort of, you know, it's what I call a pre-service, then the actual service during the session, and then there's like a post-session service, if you want, you know. So, so what I tend to do is, you know, when clients email or they contact me via my website or their phone, you know, the first thing I do is I give them stuff to look at so that they can get an idea of, you know, what they need to do to prepare themselves for the session.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've created what I call the ultimate guide to headshots, you know, or the ultimate headshot guide is what I call it.
Okay.
And so for, you know, it's a PDF document that I've created that you know, clients would download in advance, and it really takes them through a lot of the things that they need to watch out for, like, you know, simple tips like what to wear, you know, how to deal with jewelry, all of that kind of stuff, and also, like, you know, little tips, like, because, you know, a lot of people think like, "Oh, I've got to go to the hairdressers, like, have a haircut the day before the shoot," and I'm like, "Oh, don't do that. That's not a good idea," you know. So I give them some actual practical tips, you know, in terms of wardrobe and in terms of makeup.
Yeah.
For the ladies, of course, you know, the vast majority of the time, I wouldn't necessarily have a makeup artist with me. So it's just because of the nature of the type of headshots that I do. And so it's important that people know what to avoid when it comes to makeup. And you wouldn't know that unless somebody tells you to.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of information that they get before, and of course I communicate with them back and forth by email. There's a whole string of communication that goes on beforehand, and I cut it up into individual bits on purpose because it just gets people used to that back and forth communication. Mm-hmm. So they get they get a download link to the headshot FAQ, and then they would get driving and parking instructions, stuff like that, and like a reminder, And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on beforehand.
Yeah.
Before they even set foot in my lair.
Exactly. And there's different things happening there psychologically when we're sending that kind of information to our clients. Because anxiety and confidence, I could argue, are two opposite ends of the same spectrum. Where anxiety is you have no idea what's going to happen and you're worried about all the possible scenarios. Confidence, you can predict the outcome. And most people will fall somewhere in that spectrum. And when people book a photo shoot, whether it's headshots or boudoir or family or whatever, if they've never done it before, or if they've done it maybe with a Craigslist photographer, not had a great experience, they don't really know what to expect. And so it's our job to send them that information to move them from the anxiety side of the spectrum to the confidence side of the spectrum so they know what's coming, basically. But also, they're learning to count on you as the trusted advisor. They're like, okay, this person knows what they're doing. They're sending me things I didn't think of, but it seems like a no-brainer. I've got pages like that in my own prep guide. It's like, wash your hair the day before the shoot, not the day of. Moisturize your face the day of the shoot. Don't put any other products on your skin. Don't go out partying the night before. Drink lots of water that weekend. Get a full night's sleep. Don't go out partying the night before. And just little things like that. And then eat the day of the shoot because hangry doesn't look good on anyone. And then you turn the page and it says it in bold letters again. The only thing on the page is eat on the day of your shoot. Don't show up hangry. And, people always joke about that. I'm like, thank you for reading it. I appreciate that. And they're like, yeah, it was great. I felt like I already knew what to expect when I walked in here. So,
yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. It's it's answering a lot of the questions that people might have before the actual event.
Yeah.
And, you mentioned trust. I mean, trust is ultimately the most important aspect of all of that. Mm-hmm. You want to get a client to the point where they trust you implicitly with their image, basically. Yeah. Potentially, if it's a corporate headshot, it could be somebody, for example, whose face is the brand. They'll trust me with their livelihood effectively because, I'm creating imagery that will make or break their business, ultimately. Yeah. And likewise as far as acting headshots is concerned, actors rely on their headshots to get work. I mean, these things are super important, and they need, I need to get them to trust me so that I can get to the quality of the work that I want to achieve with them. And that's the thing. And people often think, actors are they used to standing in front of the camera. They're really not. It's a completely different thing. Like acting and having flash at you left, right, and center. That's a completely different thing. Mm-hmm. They're really, unless they've had tons of headshots done in the past, which a lot of new actors obviously haven't.
Right.
They're also going to be super nervous.
Yeah. Absolutely. And they don't know what questions they don't know to ask. And that's why it's important for us to put together this information. And what's cool about it is you can put it in your prep guide and send it to everyone who books you. You can string it throughout your website. You can make social media posts about it. You can write blog posts about it based on the keywords you find on Google. We talked a lot about that during our chat last week when I was on your show. And
yeah, guess what I started doing? I started writing blogs.
Nice.
So there you go.
My call yesterday, I always ask everyone, how did you find me? And she goes, I was just doing some research and you were the number 1, 2, and 3 photographer to show up. So I felt like I had to call you. I'm like, yes.
Excellent.
Yep, I'll take all 3 of the top spots. Thank you.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's great content you can use to attract new audience members. And you're thinking like, well, I want to show my work on Instagram. I want to have my photos. That's why I want people to hire me. And it's like, well, yeah, they're going to see your work and like your work. That should be a given. But now you need to make the choice obvious as to why they should choose you as a human, not just as a photo taker. And being human and being able to understand how humans work and make that connection. I think that's where phase 2 starts, right? When they walk into the studio.
Absolutely. And you want to create a relationship with your client that would potentially, last longer than just the duration of the session. Because that's really, from a business perspective, that's important, is to create relationships where people come back time and time again, ultimately. In fact, you want to create a relationship to the point where they recommend you to their friends or, colleagues and so on and so forth. So, where, it takes a while to establish that, but it will start happening. If you do a good job, I guess, and you make people feel comfortable, then that will happen. Like word of mouth will travel and people will, recommend use the service. What they're really recommending, though, is how they felt when they were doing the session, and that's because that's always the first thing people say, it's so much fun. It was so great. Well, that's how you felt. You had fun. That's awesome. Fantastic, and that's why, that's why once we're past the kind of pre-session prep, when people walk through your door, that's really when those moments are extremely important. The thing that I do to start with is I don't talk photography at all. I'm using the first few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes half an hour. It just depends on the person. I use that time to just build up that rapport and build up that trust. And the way, it's kind of, it's a no-brainer. As humans, we communicate through language and through speech. So having a simple conversation about, whatever, is really key.
Yeah.
And I think the point is always to draw your topic of conversation from the other person. And you can quite easily, you can start with very simple things like, oh, where did you just come from? How long did it take? Was the journey okay? Blah, blah. And then immediately, if they say, I don't know, I came all the way from West London. And you go, oh, West London, that's fantastic. Excellent. Where in West London? I used to live in West London, blah, blah, blah. And then you have a topic of conversation, and you can go into, oh, that's changed so much since then, da, da, da. Do you know what I mean? It really has nothing to do with photography at that point. No. It just serves the purpose of making somebody feel comfortable at that point. And you can see it in somebody's demeanor when they're nervous and they come in and exactly, they're really tense. And it's, everything I do for the first 10, 20, 30 minutes is simply aimed at getting somebody to relax. And I say that, people listening might be thinking, well, 10, 20, 30 minutes, like how long are your sessions? Quite some time ago, I stopped doing quick 20-minute headshot sessions. I could never stand them. I can't stand them. It's, in my view, and this is only my own personal opinion, of course, it's a completely pointless thing to do because I've always felt like I'm working against the clock.
Right.
And so it was making me nervous.
Yeah.
And it's this thing, this circular sort of thing, like you feel nervous, the client feels nervous, then you realize that the client feels nervous, it makes you feel even more nervous, and then the client gets even more nervous because they realize that they've just made you nervous, and so it's,
Yep.
It's a downhill, it's a slippery slope, as I say.
Yeah.
So, if I can take that away, if I can create a relaxed environment, then the outcome will benefit. And ultimately, that's why we're all here, because we want to create. I want to create, good quality work. I want my clients to be happy. They want the best imagery they can possibly get.
Yeah.
And if we're all working towards that goal right from the beginning, then we're all in the same boat.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the boudoir space, that's my hair and makeup time. And it's why hair and makeup is not optional in my photo shoots. It is required. Because we sit here for 90 minutes and we just chat. And I'm face to face with my client. As they get flipped around for hair, I move my chair. Then they get flipped around for makeup, I move my chair. I'm always looking at my client, you know, offer them bottled water, glass of wine. They pick the music when they walk in, and then we just chat. There's no camera in the room. It's in the office. So it doesn't feel like they're about to just walk in and have to take their clothes off for the camera. It's like, no, we just hang out for a while. And by the end of that 90-minute session, we're like best friends. And it's so much easier. That's my 20, 30-minute warm-up time is the hair and makeup before the camera even comes out. And my makeup artist, I mean, you know, if you ask any hairstylist to come in and just talk to people, they're magicians with that because that's what they do while they're cutting hair. So between the both of us, like there's no one we can't connect with on any level, and it's pretty wonderful. So
yeah, I mean, it's one of these things. Obviously, it does require some people skills, and I think if you, as a photographer, if you're thinking about getting into the headshot business or into the portrait business, just generally, it's really important to take a good hard look at yourself and think like, am I that kind of person? Like, do I love, communicating with people? And I said at the beginning, I'm actually more of an introvert, but I do really like people. So I'm a social introvert, as it was. I love being on my own, and fiddling around with studio gear and editing stuff and whatever. But I do really like people. It's a little bit like I think as a photographer, it's easy to sort of pin down your niche if you just analyze what kind of person you are. A little while ago, I met Kaylee Greer. She's a dog photographer, and she is incredible. I mean, she has so much energy. It's incredible, but it works perfectly when you put her with a dog. Do you know what I mean? Like, she just has that real knack of like communicating with dogs. She really understands dog behavior, and it's no surprise. I don't think photographing humans would work for her, or photographing products or something like that. It's just, she's just made to photograph dogs. It's just an absolutely perfect match. And I have many friends who are product photographers, but they're just really, they're those kind of people. They're not really conversationalists. Yeah. If you know what I mean.
That's true.
And so, and they like spending time on their own. They like the detail, like, fiddling around. Food photographers. Oh my God. Like, how much patience do you need to be a food photographer? It takes absolutely flipping forever. Do you know
More
what I
than
mean?
me.
Oh my God. Like, ooh, that corner of the salad leaf, has flapped. I need to correct that. Oh my God. Do you know what I mean? It's I tried product photography and a little bit of food photography over the pandemic, of course, when photographing humans was frowned upon.
Yep.
I did it because needs must, but man, was I glad when we got out of the whole thing.
I've done product photos too, and I'm more stoked to hang out with the engineer or the marketer, whoever's in the room with me, talking about the products, the design elements, the functionality, and just getting them to be passionate about what they do while I happen to take the pictures of the thing, because that makes me want to be more involved in the process of photographing this, I don't know, a little electronic device that I am probably never going to use in my lifetime. But it's cool to like connect with that person. So I never really connected that. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, in during the pandemic, I would be sent stuff. So they, stuff would arrive in the mail, and because people weren't allowed to meet. Over here in the UK, we're very strict, like lockdown scenarios. And I get little notes like they sent me these shampoo bars. They're basically white, pug-like. They look like soap bars, but they're round, right?
Okay.
And it's like, okay, yeah, we want them to want to shoot them for our e-commerce site, and we want them on a white background. And it's like, you want to shoot white shampoo bars on a white background? Really? Is that what you want me to do? Okay.
Just send them a blank white square, like, here you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's hilarious. But at the same time, I did partially enjoy it because there was literally nothing else to do, and so I utilized like my backyard, and I went out and hunted down particular types of flowers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not something I would normally do, and I wouldn't have done it had it not been for the pandemic. So in that respect, it was a valuable experience.
Yeah.
But I really missed photographing people. Even, I went out at nighttime and light painted cars. So but again, it was like, wouldn't it be cool if there was a person with that car?
Yep.
So yeah.
So how do you develop those skills to get someone in front of the camera?
I mean, I think if you're a people person, communicating with other humans should, in theory, come easy to you.
All right, well, this is going to wrap up part 1. As per usual, our 30-minute target time is not going to happen today. So we're going to do a part 2, and be sure to check that out here on the Boudoir Guild show. Still need that name. Post it in the comments below. Help a brother out. See you soon.